everyone, welcome back to another video. This is Allison, and today we're going to be talking about happy accidents. And I am not talking about the happy accidents that my dog Maggie has. I'm talking about the kind of accidents that happen when something doesn't turn out the way you expected and you don't give up. So here is the card we're going to be making today, and we're going to be using an embossing folder from Simon Says Stamp. This is the Soft Snowfall embossing folder. And I have a piece of turquoise cardstock, my favorite color. And I'm going to mist it. This is a 3D embossing folder, and I always mist my paper before putting it in a 3D embossing folder. So I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. And I'll talk a little bit later about sandwiches for 3D embossing folders. So here are the results, and it's really beautiful as it is. Now I apologize for the ugly piece of copy paper down there, but I'm just taking some white pigment ink and a small brayer. This is a brayer from Tim Holtz, and you're going to see what happens. All right, so you see all these stripes happening. And that is because even though this is a 3D embossing folder, there are different levels to, the dots of snow. 3D embossing folder doesn't mean you have one level that's raised and then, the level of your paper. There are different levels. So I kind of skipped over everything because I turned my camera off. I didn't like what had happened, and I really didn't think I was going to use this, but I didn't give up. And I'll show you in a minute how I came up with those diagonal lines. And the reason I kept it, and now I'm going to just add some ink blending on top to make it kind of a night sky. The reason I kept it is because the stripes, after wiping them off with a paper towel, they looked kind of like falling snow to me. So I know this embossing folder is called Soft Snowfall, but I've kind of turned it into heavy snowfall. It kind of looks like a snowstorm. So I'm just taking a couple shades of dark turquoise ink from PinkFresh Studio, and now I am putting it back in the embossing folder because when I was pressing down with my paper towel to wipe off all of that excess ink that I had not intended on getting on this panel, I really was kind of flattening it out. So I'm putting it back in the embossing folder to get those raised edges again. And obviously when I added the ink blending on the top, I lost the white snow. So here I come again. I'm going to show you how I got those diagonal lines. Now, at first, I couldn't remember how I got the diagonal lines, so I'm kind of going in the wrong direction here. But you see we're creating stripes again, and that's because when you take a brayer and it's hitting that highest level of embossing, and then it rolls off that highest level of embossing, it's going to hit the paper. And so here I've remembered. Well, I'm about to remember which way. There we go. So going on a diagonal was resulting in those diagonal lines. And so that's what had happened the first time that I didn't love. And, I just kept wiping it off and realized this is kind of cool looking. So this was just me showing you again, but I also wanted to get those highest levels of snow white again. But it's not really getting it as white as I would like. So I'm going to come in with, I'm coming in again with the brayer. And I'm coming in slow. And then, wiping off the excess again. So when things like this happen and, it's something that I didn't intend, sometimes I just keep going, and sometimes I keep going off camera because I really don't know if I'm going to use this panel or not. And this was a case where I turned the camera off when I shouldn't have. Anyway, I want to get this snow a little brighter, a little whiter. So I'm coming in with my little ink dauber, and I'm just scraping the edges of those highest points of the embossing folder. So those big pieces of snow. And these daubers are good for this because they're kind of stiff. All right, I'll talk more about that in a minute. This is the Wonky Trio die set, and I cut the pieces out of this glitter cardstock from Memory Box. And here you'll just see me playing around with positioning, and then I end up layering some of these pieces together. And I did use white glitter cardstock and silver glitter cardstock. So as I'm layering these pieces, you'll see that I'll cut parts of the bottom piece out so that you don't see it. Anyway, going back to the ink daubers. Ink daubers are really inexpensive, and they're terrible for ink blending, and that's because they're very stiff and scratchy. That's how I want to describe them. But they're great for highlighting the highest points of your embossing. Because they're not soft, they're not going to kind of squish over those high points. They're just going to, you can just kind of scrape it over those highest points to get your ink. I don't know if I'm describing this accurately or well at all, but you'll see later in the video, I'm going to share another happy accident, and I will also come in with another tool later on to highlight these big snowflakes. So here, obviously, I am just gluing everything together and figuring out where I want these placed on my card. Now, the other accident that happened with this card, it wasn't an accident. It was just a daily occurrence in the craft room of Allison. I had wanted to use a stamp set for this card, and I had taken it out when I took out this embossing folder, and then I proceeded to lose it. I know, it's shocking, but it got, I don't know, a bunch of piles of stuff put on it. So I had to finish this card, and so here's that sentiment that I'm using at the moment, because I could not find the stamp set that I wanted to use. So this stamp is from I think it's from the Abstract Holidays. I think it's what it's called. I'll put the name at the top. And I do love this sentiment, but it's not what I wanted. But again, I needed to finish the card. So now I'm adding some Oh My Stars Confetti. This is from Trinity Stamps, and these are just flat holographic stars, and they're really fun. They just add that perfect amount of sparkle, and I love that they're flat. So, and some of them are really tiny, which I love. So there you can see the sparkle. All right, so here we go. Now it's like a couple weeks later, and I unearthed the stamp set. This is the Clean Line Christmas. This is what I had originally wanted to use. So, a couple weeks later, this card was still sitting on my desk, and I really felt the need to change the sentiment. Now you can see here in this area where I had to pull up that other sentiment, and it left a little glue residue, which I tried to clean up. But I'm going to come back in and highlight some of that snow. And this is the shader brush 0 Plus. So these just came out from Waffle Flower. And so here's another tool to use if you have small areas to ink up. So I'm just coming in, and I'm trying to highlight the parts where I had to erase the adhesive, but now I'm coming into all of the big snowflakes because of when I originally inked them up with the little ink dauber, it does dry back. So when you use pigment ink, it will look very white at first, but then it will dry back. So going over them a second time with this brush really helps them stand out more. So here is the final card, and I call it a happy accident because it's really not what I intended, but I think it looks really cool. All right, so here is a surprise card. This is another happy accident. Now I had started this card using the Cloud Lines stencil. This came out from Simon maybe 3 months ago. And just like in my last card, I'm going to use some PinkFresh Studio Ink. And for this card, I am just going to ink around the edges to create a glow. All right. You don't know what card I'm about to make. And if you follow me on Instagram, or I think this is part of a blog hop, maybe last month, or yeah, you're going to be surprised what this card is. And there's a reason I'm not showing you the card yet, because if you've seen this card, you would have no way of knowing that it started out with a cloud stencil. So here's the Wheat Stems embossing folder. This is the embossing folder that I'm going to be using for this panel. And it has some really pretty wheat stems. And my idea with the clouds is that I was going to have these wheat stems and, you know, with the glow in the center, these really pretty wheat stems were going to stand out against the glow. Well, that's not what happened. And keep in mind, this is several weeks before I made this Snowfall embossing folder card. So here I come with my brayer, and you know what's going to happen because there are more flat areas to this panel than there are raised areas. So already you see me wiping off some of the excess ink, and as soon as I started, I knew what was going to happen. I mean, I knew that there weren't that many raised parts. The wheat itself is the most raised part of this panel. So again, I really didn't know what was going to happen with this panel. I did keep the camera rolling this time. And you're going to see, number one, what a hot mess this panel becomes, and number two, how overworked it becomes, because like, even especially at this point, I'm like, there's no way I am using this panel. This is a hot mess. I don't know what I'm going to do. So then I just started coming in with a bunch of other colors, and wow, is that ugly, right? But I figured, you know, I've already been playing with this. Let's see what we can do. And then I decided, well, I was using Distress Oxide, so maybe I can just wet it and try to get some of that color at the top to move. But this paper was not, I would never have used this paper to work with water, so it wasn't really cooperating. I think I had probably started off with a blue piece of cardstock. So still not giving up, because I figure what else do I have to do? I could do the laundry, I could do dishes, or I could just keep playing with this mess. So now I have the embossing folder again, and I'm inking up the flat part now. Like you can see, the wheat stems are not being inked up. They're debossed right now. So I inked up the flat part, and now I'm going to fit this back in. It just snaps in, and I don't know if I mentioned that before when I put the Snowfall panel back in that embossing folder. But with 3D embossing folders, you can kind of feel, this is taking me a while, but you can kind of feel around, and ultimately you'll feel it kind of click into place. So then just carefully press it closed and put it through your machine. Now, while I continue to potentially destroy this panel, I want to talk about 3D embossing folders. Now, I use a Platinum 6 from Spellbinders, and there's a new universal plate system. And again, I'm just going to let you watch everything that I'm doing to try to save this panel. So with the universal plate system with Spellbinders, if you use Spellbinders 3D embossing folders, there is a specific sandwich, and it tells you on the machine what to use. If you use other companies' 3D embossing folders, you kind of have to play around and experiment. Now, some companies, Spellbinders has come out with, you know, if you use this company's embossing folders, here's the recommended sandwich. I can't remember which companies. Maybe they've made recommendations for Tim Holtz. Maybe Altenew. I just can't remember. But what I do, because I have not seen recommendations for Simon's stamp folders, I just play around. So I put the embossing folder in there. Oh, here I come with the ink dauber, and you'll see it's a really easy way to get ink on those wheat stems, on those highest points of the embossed panel. Anyway, I just play around. So I put my embossing folder on top of the whatever that main thing is in the die cutting machine. I'm losing my words now. The platform. And then, you know, you just start running it through. And if it runs through too easily, you start adding things. And, you know, that can be a folded piece of cardstock, 2 folded pieces of cardstock, whatever it takes. Just keep running it through. And if it's going through too easily, it's not going to result in a great embossed panel. So if you put it through and it can go through with a little bit of resistance, but you're still able to get it through, then you have found the right sandwich. So, and you know, even with Simon, every embossing folder is a little bit different. I mean, most of them would take the same sandwich, but you just never know. So I always suggest playing around, find the right sandwich for the embossing folder, and you can't go wrong. So now I have taken some gold watercolor paint, and you saw I just splattered some of that paint on there. And now we're finishing up, so I just wanted to show you this part. See this teeny tiny ridiculous pieces of foam tape that I had cut? I had stamped this sentiment onto vellum, and then I fussy cut it. And I don't usually ever do this. I don't think I've ever cut foam tape this tiny before. So it's definitely a labor of love. I had already worked this panel so hard to get it where it was that, you know, I was going to keep working hard. So this sentiment is from the Bold Smiles stamp set. And I'm just going to pop that up. And you would never have known that this card started from clouds, right? Anyway, that's another happy accident. I love this card. Don't give up if you make a mistake. Just, you know, keep playing. It's all about playing and having fun. That's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I will see you next time. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.